Behind These Eyes, a short science fiction story by yours truly. Hey, Lancaster, over here. It was her friend Ferreira. She had been waiting patiently for her at the airport now, for what seemed like an enormous amount of time. Let me help you with those, she said, grabbing a piece of her luggage, thinking to herself how exhausting it was traveling. Having some empathy at that moment. Thanks, Ferreira said, in a tired but appreciative tone. How was the flight? Oh, it was okay. I always seem to be given the seat right next to the biggest guy on the plane. She said this statement, hinting at the notion that she was going to maintain political correctness, not speaking out against the man's lifestyle choices, just that she disliked the experience, thinking now she shouldn't have said anything at all. Lancaster was able to pick up on this, telling herself a story about another in an almost derogatory sense, letting Ferreira know it was okay for her to speak her mind. I'm glad we've been able to stay friends all this time, Lancaster. Me too. Well, let's get back to the house. I know how traveling can really drain a person, Lancaster said, as she popped the trunk to her sedan, loading the luggage she had been lugging during their brief conversation. Is the professor excited about the experiment tomorrow? Ferreira said as she hopped into the passenger seat, calling out shotgun, even though there wasn't another to contend with her for the seat, a game that her and Lancaster used to play often as children. Yes, he has everything set up, and has rehearsed what he is going to say, just about as many times as he has run the experiment, he says. He is glad that someone is finally taking interest in his work. Well, don't thank me, said Ferreira. This is all you're doing. I just came for the beach, not for some madman's science. Lancaster knew she was joking, but not really. It wasn't hard to get people to come visit her and use the visit as an excuse to go on a little vacation. She couldn't blame any of them. She would probably do the same if it were her living somewhere else and she was close friends with someone who lived somewhere similar to where she did now. You know I'm joking, right? I came to see you and what you've been up to. I know that this man's work is extremely important to you, and I'm here to support you. If I can get a little work done for the magazine while I'm visiting you, and get rid of this hideous porcelain coat I'm wearing, let's just say the new idiom will include 3 birds instead of 2. Well, do you want to go to the beach now, or get back to the house? Not wanting to seem pushy, but definitely not wanting to shield the fact that she wouldn't mind laying out on the beach for a minute, a fact that she knew Lancaster would catch on to. With her demeanor alone, she said, yeah, let's go to the beach. The day was fun. They spent the rest of it fighting off seagulls, sometimes feeding them and laughing, along with all of the men on the beach who thought they stood a chance, for which they treated exactly the same as the seagulls. Lancaster wrote all of this in her journal, a habit that she had picked up after being a scientific researcher for so long. It was tedious, but to allow anyone wanting to replicate the work to do so, each and every detail had to be painstakingly inscribed, so as to allow peer review to effectively take place. The smell of coffee got Ferreira up easily enough. She had left her to sleep while she had went off to one of the local coffee shops and picked up a drink for both. Thanks, Ferreira said as she scrambled over to the veranda. It was so nice here. You could smell the air, a byproduct of the humidity, she supposed. She had almost gone down the same route as Lancaster, but instead of maintaining a course in the sciences, she had stumbled into journalism, a fact that she was happy about. It was a nice morning. The flora seemed to come to life as they did. Everything was starting to wake up, and that was their cue that it was time to leave. I'll be out here waiting, reviewing notes for the day. Take your time getting ready. We need to leave here by 8 o'clock, making it to the lab by 9 o'clock. The drive was nice. You could stare out the window and just get lost in the beauty, both natural and man-made structures, which Ferreira did for the duration of the drive. They didn't talk much, but they were comfortable enough around each other that the silence wasn't awkward. It was welcomed, and they had enough moments of frantic speech around each other that moments like this somehow balanced it all out. As they arrived at the university, Ferreira had second thoughts about her choice for graduate school. The campus was beautiful, and the buildings themselves somehow accentuated the surroundings, heightening the feeling of everything. Well, we're here, said Lancaster. Let's go and see what the professor is up to. Ferreira had spent enough time researching this man before embarking on this journey, But it was always another thing entirely to meet someone in person than through second-hand information. She wondered what he would really be like underneath the pages of the public media that seemed to hide who people really were, painting the picture of whoever the journalists wanted them to be, which is why she had her job, because she was good at doing just that. At that moment, she was glad that this piece was something that she had proposed to the magazine rather than an assignment. When given something to work on, she was usually prompted to expose the characters in a certain light. The politics of papers. Everyone was on a different side of the coin, and it made sense to show the side that the paper was on as well. Taking out her ID badge, Lancaster passed it in front of a detection device. Upon beeping, Ferreira heard the door unlocking. It kind of startled her. This place was real, on the forefront of knowledge, and with the security to boot. She didn't say anything, but was kind of nervous about the whole situation, and kind of jealous about Lancaster's life for a minute, and the possible influence that she had on the world. She supposed that her job was influential as well. The papers could indefinitely change the view of the world and the direction that it traveled. Maybe Lancaster was jealous of her. "Well, here we are," Lancaster said, after they had taken an elevator down underground and were about to open another door which required a similar security procedure as the first. "Professor!" Lancaster joyfully said as she ran up, giving him a hug. Ferreira thought it odd that they seemed to be on such close terms, but Lancaster had explained that even though they were a graduate-level university, due to the multitude of factors in the area, their class sizes were relatively small, allowing people to form close bonds and friendships, something that she loved about the school. "This is my friend Ferreira," Lancaster said to the professor, directing their attention onto her. The man was dressed in an untucked Hawaiian-style shirt, khakis, wore thin wire frame glasses, a soft smile, which made her relax, feeling that he was. "Hello, my name is Sean. We're short on formalities around here. Don't worry about calling me professor. This is my life's work," he said, as he opened up one side of his posture, drawing attention to the facility, seemingly welcoming her to the environment, saying hello, but also saying it was okay to be here. The interview was extremely informal and unorthodox. At least to her it seemed that way. She was used to interviewing high-profile individuals, and they usually presented themselves in a way in which she had to really try to penetrate the individual, what they were saying, and what they were hiding behind their words. It was almost as if she were still on vacation, not being a part of work at all, just hanging out with friends, and getting a first-hand private tour on something she could see being featured on the Discovery Channel, or on the front page of National Geographic, possibly even Popular Science. "This is the quantum computer," the professor said, showing her the entirety of the device. It was something grand to behold, almost as much a work of art as it was of science. As they sat in front of the interface, Sean spoke of how the device functioned, and that the mechanics of the computer were a relatively small portion of the device, and that the majority was just the housing in which the device sat suspended. The outer casing provided an internal environment that shielded the components from every form of interference that they knew existed, or that they hypothesized to be. He explained that for the device to operate, it needed to be extremely isolated, and that the internal temperature was as close to zero as one could possibly be, or at least that science was able to achieve today. The device was explained to her as being the most recent model, containing a processing power previously unheard of by any device on the market today. Another perk of the university, in regards to its location, it made it perfectly suited to house such experiments, and the devices that carried them out. She had read up a little on quantum computers before she had decided to propose a paper dedicated to this endeavor. It seemed controversial enough in her mind that it would provide the story with enough to give it viewership, something she often wasn't proud of in the field of journalism, but a truth nonetheless. Sean could tell that as he stood without a seeming care in the world, that Ferreira was a little bit tense about the entire device. "It is perfectly safe, I assure you. Life is something that has been able to hold its shape through much worse than the simple implications of this device. Drawing upon the vast expanse of everything, and how much was actually going on around them and beyond them, always and forever, trying to draw attention on the pointlessness it was to worry about the ramifications of something like this. When there were a limitless number of untold and unseen forces out of and beyond their control, it didn't calm her mind down at all, but was glad that at least the operator was relaxed, now questioning herself, thinking that he should be extremely uptight about the power at the tip of his fingertips. Something like this shouldn't be used by such a laxed individual, without a care in the wind, simply discounting the implications it has on the world, citing that the universe is something chaotic enough that this experience was nothing that wasn't going to happen again, by what he explained to be a never-ending cycle, with each experience rendering a 100% chance to reoccur. Don't worry, he said, if it was, it'll be again. But imagine what could be. She was done with the possibilities, wondering how she was going to spin the story. Lancaster was her friend, but she felt she had a certain duty to expose the world with not only the pros to a situation, but the cons and implications as well. Lancaster saw her friend turn and take upon her a serious note, something that hinted toward the notion she was working at the moment, the wheels of reporting turning within her mind, pen and pad out and open, with plenty of little scribbles on the pages. Her camera was in constant motion from one section of the lab to another. She saw less and less of her friend's face, and more of the empty blank space between them as the lens of the camera pointed in her direction. "Hey, we're having fun here, remember?" Lancaster said, directed at Ferreira. "Yeah, I know, but I have to treat this as a serious part of my job. Otherwise, when I return home, I'll want to hide behind my tan rather than revel in it." Giggles were exchanged, and it seemed things were back to normal between everyone. The day progressed in a harmless manner, and turned out to be rather enjoyable, as Sean explained more so what the computer was used for, and her mind had finally calmed down, and maybe saw a glimpse at how Sean saw things. There were crazy things going on all around them all the time, and yet, here they were, nothing was happening. She guessed either one could live in fear through all of it, or accept that was always going on, and instead choose to see the peace that was going on always as well. "Would you like to see it in operation?" Lancaster asked Ferreira. "Of course. I didn't come here to see a dead machine," she exclaimed. "You're in for a real treat, Ra," a nickname she had gone by to close friends once upon a time. Lancaster walked up to the computer's interface and began typing commands. It looked as though she had done this a countless number of times, the way her fingers seemingly glided across the keyboard, almost like she was playing the piano. Lancaster was having fun. She enjoyed nothing more than her work, and to share that with one of her friends was the best of both worlds, neither having a dull moment without something to talk about in regards to the scientific implications she was revolutionizing. As she typed, she felt a small vibration in the soles of her feet. She dismissed it as a minor tremor. The area geographically had the occasional tremors, and was tectonically fairly active. It didn't help matters that the facility was underground, a variable taken into extreme consideration as the lab was built. The whole space was outfitted with devices to cushion and react along with the surrounding Earth, maintaining equilibrium, gyroscopic almost, maintaining its coordinates in all planes as everything else shifted. As she dismissed the occurrence, she felt it again, but this time the sensation had a little bit more behind it, shaking her frame as it grew, slow enough to recognize a change, but fast enough as to where she couldn't react. The feeling reminded her of the once popular prank of connecting with the nerve right behind a friend's knee, causing them to collapse upon stimulation of the nerve. She fell, but didn't hit the ground. The room she was once in was a hole off in the distance that she was staring up into, in which blackness now surrounded her. As she spiraled downward, the moment seemed to never end. As she continually fell out of herself, the best way her mind could describe it, as the beat of an imagined metronome struck its center axis. She fell out of a different version of herself, all spiraling upward to the room in which was now beyond her view. As she continually fell backward, each body she fell out of suspended in motion above her. Was she dying? She had never experienced anything similar to this, even in her dreams. It was so vivid and sensational that her mind began to worry. She closed her eyes and cried out, At that moment, she felt herself no longer falling, and was standing, instead, not in the lab, but at the beach. Something was still off. It took her a minute or two to realize, but nothing was moving. Staring out off into the ocean, even the curl of a wave was motionless. Caught in the peak of its moment, she wasn't as frightened as before. The scene in which she could envision wasn't as maniacal as the previous one. In this, she almost became explorative, but with the intent of finding a way out, back to where she had came from, not wanting to stay here any longer than need be. She turned around, but as she did, it was the same scene as before. She was once again staring off into the ocean from the beach. She decided to walk towards the water, and as she walked, she noticed something a little different from her other perspective. Something was moving as she did. She turned around and it wasn't there. Turned back around and there it was. She walked towards it. As she got closer, the features of the figure became more apparent, and she quickly realized it was her reflection, like she was walking up to a mirror that was stretched in all directions. As far as she could see, the mirror was flawless, giving a sensation of more space than there really was, a technique often used to create the illusion that there is in small buildings. She continued to walk toward the figure, and as she closed in, she began to take a real good look at herself. Would she be the only one to ever see this? As a child, her mind had sometimes kept her from falling asleep, running over things such as that she was the only one to ever be her. Nobody else would experience anything exactly the same as her, and if they did, the only possible explanation was that they were her, only reinforcing the notion. Behind these eyes, she was forever locked into an experience that could only be experienced by her and no one else. As she stared into the mirror, she didn't notice it at first, but she was beginning to fall again, this time forwards, not backwards. She hadn't slipped, but rather, it felt like the earth beneath her feet was entirely gone. She crashed into herself, and the mirror shattered. A cool sensation enveloped her, similar to the feeling of having blood rush back into a body part, upon someone close and comfortable, cutting off the supply, and then having it rush back, their release with soothing words, and subtle strokes from the point in which the blood was originating. As she woke up, she heard voices. They weren't hers, and were familiar. "Lancaster! Lancaster! Are you all right?" It was her friend, Ferreira. She managed to breathe out a yes, and began to stir. "Here, let me help you." Another familiar voice. It was Sean. She felt his hand grab her wrist, and she gripped onto his, and felt herself begin to rise, as power was beginning to flood back into her body. "I'm okay," she said. "Good," said Sean. "We were worried there for a minute. What happened?" she asked. "Well," Sean described, "you passed out. Just dropped like a rock out of nowhere and fell onto the floor." "What about the earthquake?" she explained. "What earthquake?" said Ferreira. "I thought I felt—" As she spoke, her mind ran over what had just happened. In light of the entire experience, it wasn't too hard to fathom that the earthquake she had thought knocked her over was just a part of her imagination, as was the entire experience. Maybe I had a little too much coffee without any food or water, along with the excitement of seeing an old friend, working on what I love. I just locked up as I was so focused on what I was doing. At the moment, it was the only explanation she could come up with. "Well, we're glad you're back with us. Are you sure you are all right?" said Sean. "Yeah, I'm totally fine. If you guys aren't too shaken up, I think we should get back to the demonstration." The other two laughed, as it seemed they were both on the same page, questioning her statement as to whom should be shaken up.